Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Paul and Tom for another episode in the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. And this time we reach the year 2054 as we bring you a review on Minority Report, starring, of course, Tom Cruise and directed by Steven Spielberg, quite clearly based on this series' title. But before we start getting into that stuff, how are we both doing today?
Yeah, doing well. Getting ready for the heat wave that's coming in a few days.
Yes.
Oh, geez, that's going to be unbearable. Especially with
another one.
Another heat wave. It's just, God's sake.
So,
I myself am doing very well. Thanks, George.
Excellent. Well, this is exciting. Getting you both together for the first time as well. Tom, you've been on 7 episodes now. Paul, this is your second on the series. And, you know, I think it's fair to say we're all fans of science fiction. This is what I've seen a lot of us speaking about previously. And I know we've got War of the Worlds in a couple of weeks as well. So it'd like to be us three with maybe a fourth person coming on that one too. Just teasing a few things down the line. But what we want to do, before we get into any of that sort of stuff, I want to hear from everybody in the comments below. So comment below your thoughts on Minority Report. This is going to be one of the more... I mean, I say that we did AI last week, which raised a lot of fascinating conversation points. I know Tom, you had this and that one, but this is going to be a really interesting debate. And I'm going to try and, in regards to not debate, discussion, thematics, all that sort of stuff, because this is certainly one of the more adult Spielberg films, I would say, in terms of what he's presenting on screen. So I want to hear from people your thoughts on the film. Has your thoughts changed over the years? And as well, if you're a fan of Steven Spielberg, you're a fan of Tom Cruise, why not hit the subscribe button? We've got a lot more videos coming for each of those actors, all that sort of stuff, and it does really help. So please do like and comment those thoughts. And if you want to find us, you want to find out what videos are coming up, what's happening, the best way to do so is getting us on our social medias, which is Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and we have a link to Redbubble in that description below. But before we even get into the IMDb plot synopsis, I want to put you both on the spot. Obviously, we've done a lot of these. Tom, I'm not going to make you pick a beer because I forgot about that. But obviously, we had you both on where we, asked everyone Spielberg memories. I'm actually going to do a 180 for this. Everyone's favorite Tom Cruise film. Go.
That is tough. That is tough. Collateral, I want to say. Yeah, Collateral or A Few Good Men.
Michael Mann, very good choice. Tom?
Jeez, that's a tough one. I'm gonna say a couple. I'm gonna go with Collateral is one, Magnolia another.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good choice.
And for an action-packed one, Mission Impossible 6.
That's also good.
I've lost all their titles. Is that Rogue Nation? Is that the Henry Cavill one?
No, 6 is Fallout.
Fallout, yeah.
Fallout.
Right. Excellent. No, all very good choices.
Oh, and Edge of Tomorrow.
Individual.
Edge of Tomorrow is good as well. See, it's tough. It's tough because he's easy to make fun of, but he's got so many good movies.
Yeah.
He's such a weird. He's a weird one. We'll go into it when we get to cast, but he's a frustrating man.
I'll plug this. I've never really plugged another podcast that I don't think not on it or I've ever spoke to, but there's an amazing podcast called Light the Fuse, which is like a Mission Impossible podcast, and they just had the 200th episode, and Tom Cruise actually came on for it, and they're just fans, and he was meant to come on for 10 minutes and stay for an hour until his internet broke off. But anyone that wants to hear him speaking about the industry. He was speaking about his approach to filmmaking, producers, not the sort of stuff you ever get in press. So if anyone wants to hear a really good Tom Cruise interview, go check that out. Again, we're not associated with them, but I was completely blown away. He spoke about working with Spielberg as well, and I get to bring a fair amount of that actually up on War of the Worlds in a few weeks. So that's some nice tidbits I'm going to drip feed. But yeah, it was a very good way to put everyone on the spot. I'm kind of entertained. You can sort of pick the dramas or action, and because I don't want to pick Top Gun Maverick because it's so new, but I'm probably going to pick Top Gun Maverick because it's still like, it's my life at the moment. And Edge of Tomorrow, I think the one I'm going to stick up there as well, because that was the film where I think you growing up, you know of Tom Cruise. Everyone knows who Tom Cruise is when you're younger. Without delving into British culture too much, did anybody ever watch a show called Star Stories? It was like a
Yeah.
comedy spoof show on Channel 4.
Yeah, love.
I remember there was a Tom
stories.
Cruise one when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then Edge of Tomorrow's the film where I saw it as well. I thought, oh, like, not this guy's good because I liked him. And I was like, this is something here. And that's where I've really started to home in his career. I've still got to watch a lot of his dramas. I'm not going to lie. I've got a lot of his dramas to watch.
It's funny, Minority Report and Edge of Tomorrow play into a thing I have about Cruise, which is when he plays an out-and-out hero, I'm not interested. Mission Impossible aside, because that's a bit different. That's more about how can we kill him without killing him. But when it comes to his like other roles, all the best ones, he's a coward or he's a villain. Like Magnolia, he's not a nice guy. Collateral, he's a villain. Even in this, he's not, he's drug addict. He's not a good guy. In War of the Worlds, he's a bit of a coward. Like all the stuff I like him in most. And Edge of Tomorrow as well. At the start, he's just a politician type. He's an absolute coward. And that journey he's really good at playing the dickhead that becomes a good guy. And I think that's why I don't like The Mummy. He's just a good guy. It's boring.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like I say, Mission Impossible is a bit different because really those films hinge on can we kill him, but not actually kill him, but put him in a situation where he may die and then see what happens.
And he'll do it for real. He will make sure he does it for real, and he'll make sure we're all told.
I want to see him in a Jackass film. Him and Johnny Knoxville just one-upping each other on how they can hurt each other would be a film I would watch.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Put Knoxville in a Mission Impossible film.
It wouldn't last 2 seconds. Come on.
No, Knoxville will be like, is it train off the cliff? They're like, yeah, Knoxville, okay, tie me to the front of it, and I promise you I just won't move. And that'll be the end of Johnny Knoxville. And he'd probably want it that way. But
wait, where's Johnny gone? Oh no, I dislocated my penis again. Oh no, someone help me. Then he's just like laughing in the background.
Then you get another Tom Cruise rant, which is a classic for anyone that's not heard that, up there with Christian Bale. And I fully agree with people, anyone that's worked in the industry, fully on Tom Cruise's side for that, especially with the last few years. But moving on into some of Minority Report, as we always kickstart these, we have the IMDb plot synopsis. And for a film as layered as Minority Report, I was dreading it. But we've been blessed with only 2 lines. And it is as follows. In a future where a special police unit is able to arrest murderers before they commit their crimes, an officer that is from the unit himself is accused of a future murder. Very simple, straight to the point. Leaves nothing there. And really, it's not just the basis for the film, but for a film as complex as this, because I feel this is a complex film, not in terms of what's presented, we're not battered over the head of exposition. It's more like the inner themes and meaning and the, I don't want to say ethics, I'm going to sound like I'm back at school. I'm going to get into that in a bit. But for a film that I think has a lot more going on than most films of both Spielberg and Tom Cruise, that's the best simple setup, and it's the way they deal with the situation that I think makes the film what it is and why it stands out. Because you get that loads of times. Oh, look, a cop who's not bent is going to get framed, or well, it's like every Mission Impossible film. You're now on the run, Tom, and now we're going to bring you back, but then you'll go on the run again next week. And it's kind of what I want to kind of jump to with this. Sorry, is just asking everyone, like, do you not so much memories of the film, but can you remember maybe like the first time you saw this, or if you've seen this over the years, if it's the viewpoints changed? Because I'm curious to know everyone's sort of background of this film.
Yeah, see, I don't remember the first time I saw it. I mean, I remember my mum took my cousin to see it for her birthday. I'm really wanting to see it, but I was too young because it was like a 12 or something. But one of my weirder memories is we studied it at uni when I was doing film studies. We were doing a whole thing on how film depicts the city. And so we did like, some like stuff about Italy post-war, how the city's depicted. And then we watched Spider-Man, weirdly. And then we watched this for like future cities. And I just remember watching it in film studies, just going, God, I forgot how much I love this film. And then rewatching it like a couple of days ago for this, I was going, God, I forgot how much I love this film.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm much the same. I don't really remember the first time I watched it. However, one thing that does stand out is that I remember being absolutely freaked out by the image of Anne Lively in the water. That shit me up like massively when I was younger.
It looks like Prune Face of Star Wars.
Oh, it's just.
Yeah, it's true.
Sorry, I had to say it. It's a terrifying image.
And the music associated with that was just like I hated watching it. But it's a
bit
film
of a horror film.
Yeah,
like
it's a film. It's a film I've definitely flip flopped on between sort of not really liking and quite enjoying, because I always when I flip flopped with it before, I always thought, well, why doesn't he just lock himself in a basement somewhere and just ride out the next 32 hours and then just go, oh, I didn't kill anyone. There you go, and movie's over. Make a very boring film, but make a very logical one.
And that's something that I have thought of. Like, it's the ultimate, like, I hate cinema sins, but it's that kind of thing, isn't it? That it can get boiled down to something as little as that, and it makes sense for every murderer.
Yeah.
And it's a really good entry point for it.
But
what were you in a film?
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just going to say, but then you've not, like, if you're going to boil it down to that, then you've not got a film. And people in films don't act like Vulcans. They act like people, and people do stupid things.
And I think as well, I mean, we'll get into some like the themes and whatnot later, but I think this film is more about the Tom Cruise thing. To me, is almost a subplot of what the film is. The real film is the politics of the is this morally right / legally right to have this crime stopping unit become a thing, because it's going to become a national thing, etc., etc. And the Tom Cruise thing is like the example which really pushes the film into being a story for us to follow, with that always happening in the background. And we have to about that later on. But sort of my background on this, I mentioned ethics earlier, and I'm sorry I've already told you about it a few times, but I watched this when I was at school doing my GCSEs. So we had two GCSEs, RE, religious education, and ethics were combined into like the same thing for 2 years. And in the ethics half, we watched Minority Report. At the time I hadn't seen it. I was obviously getting to film a lot more, but then I was like, oh, a Spielberg and Tom Cruise film, excellent. This would have been like 2010, 11 now. And I really enjoyed it to the point, when you watch the film at school and they'd be like, come back next week and we'll see the second half. I'm pretty sure I ended up like going out and buying the DVD like that weekend, so I don't have to wait. Like, I was really enjoying it, and I've never been big on piracy. I know back then you could probably get everything on YouTube. I remember people. So I used to be able to upload films to YouTube, which was really rare. But I remember studying this for school, and again, it's why I'm going to probably bring up all the thematics, because it's been sort of drilled into me, and this was before I studied film. And then obviously, as got more of a fan of Cruise and Spielberg, I've revisited this film a few times over the past few years, and I absolutely love it. But watching it again in prep for today, I think we've kind of had the summer of Tom Cruise. Like, have you noticed like how everyone is on the Tom Cruise hype train? And because we've been doing the Spielberg series, it's been this sort of perfect timing to get a Spielberg Tom Cruise film watched. And I really had such a ball watching it. And I thought going in, it was exceptional still. But I think also pretty ahead of itself, which we'll get into. Not literally, because it's set in 2054. But just some other things. And where I want to kind of go from this, if we start looking at some of the behind the scenes stuff. So I don't know any of this. I've got to put my hands up. I've still never seen Total Recall. So I need just to say that. There's a few Arnie films I've not seen. I think it's literally sat in a shower behind me for about 10 years now. I literally had it when I was at school, and I've still not seen it.
To be fair, I only just saw it for the first time last year when it got re-released. So I'm pulling faces, but I'm as bad.
Another Total Recall reference. We've got Colin Farrell in this, who was in the reboot, I think, wasn't he? There was a reboot.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a nice little nod that's come through. But this was going to be a sequel to Total Recall. Again, because I've not seen the original, I don't know the ins and outs of that. But it was essentially going to be the prequels were going to be sort of humans or altered humans on Mars or something like that. Again, I've not seen it, so that will mean probably more to anyone that has.
That does make sense, having seen it, because like all the stuff on Mars is they're mutants and they've like, 3 tits and stuff like that. So that does, I can see how they do that. That does make sense, but it still seems weird to like do it as a sequel.
Think it could be Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's Tom Cruise. That's quite a change.
That is a parody I want to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just again, some of the background. So what happened is the studio went bust that was doing this, obviously in the mid-90s. And then it was a short story. And the author, John Cohen, was essentially hired to turn it into a script in 1997, which is where it gets interesting. Because, as I said, I mean, we're all a bit younger than most. Tom Cruise obviously never worked with Steven Spielberg. And it was announced in 1998 they'd come together to do this Minority Report film, which at the time apparently was massive. That you get Spielberg. I mean, we're speaking before we hit record. We were trying to work out like what big director-actor combo have we never seen that would have this like big marketing push if it happened sort of tomorrow. I think Tom Cruise Nolan would be a great one, actually. I don't want to just start theorizing, but I've had that conversation before where those two they're both the action, practical effects, stunts, etc., group, and
he's
that's
kind
one
of a weird one though. Like Cruise doesn't really work with. I don't like the word auteur, but he doesn't work with like auteurs anymore. He kind of has his guys that does what he says. Whereas, because he's like, when you look at his back catalogue of directors, he's like the only guy who's worked with Coppola, De Palma, Scorsese, and Spielberg. And then you add into that Tony Scott, Ridley Scott, Ron Howard, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, he's like Rob Reiner, Sidney Pollack. Like, he's worked with John Woo. He's worked with like some of the best. And then post War of the Worlds, he kind of was like, no, I want directors that I can sort of lean on, and you get like Macquarie and Kaczynski and people like that. But I know that someone said he wants to go back to his, the character roles after he's finished Mission Impossible, and him and Nolan would be so good. Him and Nolan would be like, I can imagine he would have been good in Inception. Like DiCaprio is great, but Tom Cruise Inception, that would be a movie. Like, that would be him in Tenet would have been good.
He'd be like, I'm actually gonna, not learn to go backwards, but he probably wouldn't do it unless they could actually live in the backwards world. He'd need the real inversion machines.
Yeah.
Or like Tom Cruise and Oppenheimer, like, can I actually drop a nuclear bomb? Not that we know that's going to happen. But that's obviously been a meme used a lot recently. But yeah, that's an interesting one. It came to me then because it's a really obvious one. I remember when Tenet came out, he did that promo, didn't he? It's like a back to the movies outside the BFI IMAX with like spreading his arms out, which was great. That's become like a meme tourist spot now. But yeah, just jumping back to Spielberg and Cruise. So it obviously naturally got delayed, which those again coming together in 1998. But you've got to think you've just had Saving Private Ryan for obviously Spielberg, and Tom Cruise at that point is Eyes Wide Shut out? Then I'm not familiar with his order of like the 90s.
99.
Worked with all the. Is that 99? Is 98 Magnolia? Sorry, I'm trying to work out the years. I'm not.
I think Magnolia is 2000. So I think he's just Mission Impossible and maybe like The Firm or something like that. Days of Thunder, maybe.
So I mean, Eyes Wide Shut and Magnolia came out the same year, 99.
Yeah. That's a good year. That's a good year for Cruise.
Yeah, very good. And you got to think as well, that's him going with the big name directors. And obviously, this got delayed. And a lot of it was down to, obviously, Spielberg did AI. Tommy joined us for that video where he took on after Kubrick passed away. And that was his sort of testament to it. And also, there was a lot of delays with Mission Impossible 2 for Tom Cruise. So it kind of, the schedules didn't align until after those came out or those were in production, finished production. With the script being turned in 2001. Now, Mission Impossible 2 and AI are two very different films. But it is interesting. Again, I'm just sort of trying to map in this message that I'm so fixated that I've never seen a big director-actor combo for the first time. And these two, you must have think like, like how, not film Twitter, because I hate using the word like that, but you know how like people are on film Twitter when they react to news? And like imagine discussing film tweeted like Tom Cruise and Spielberg to be in their first ever film together. Like that would probably blow up the internet if that was today. And it's really interesting that, as you said, Tom Cruise was doing this in the early noughties. And you are right, sort of post War of the Worlds. I'm just trying to think of some of the, I know he did Tropic Thunder, which is Ben Stiller, but he's not had, his roles, as he said, have not. He's had that same group, and he's very comfortable working with them, and I think he's enjoying what he's able to do.
Yeah, well, I think that's the period of his career where he was essentially working with real sort of auteur directors at that point, up until 2005 with The Last Samurai, is really working with those were the films where he, I think, tested himself more as an actor than any of the other roles that he's done. And then obviously transitioning into the more action heavy, the more stunt heavy performances that he's recently known for. But you think of some of his early work, he's actually, very good, and often gets overlooked how good Tom Cruise actually is as an actor.
I think people forget he's a 3-time Oscar nominee as well for acting. Yeah. Born on the 4th of July is a great film. That's a great performance. And Jerry Maguire is great. I love Jerry Maguire. I think he's really good in that role. Show Me the Money is great. And then Magnolia is like, where's this guy been? And I still, whenever I go back, and it's weird, Paul Thomas Anderson, kind of, not to go on a Paul Thomas Anderson thing, it's also how I feel about Adam Sandler. When I watch Punch Drunk Love, and I'm like, where's this guy? Where is this guy been? And he kind of, yeah. And then Uncut Gems comes, and you're like, yeah, he's a great actor. And actually, that basketball film he did for Netflix a couple of weeks ago, and you're like, okay, so you do know how to act. So the Ridiculous Six is a conscious choice. And the same with Tom Cruise. It's like, so you do know a good film script when it comes up. So The Mummy was a conscious choice, which means you're fully to blame.
Well, the Monsters cinematic universe that we never got to see.
There was going to be a whole universe of darkness. There was going to be a whole universe of it. There was going to be a Johnny Depp Invisible Man. Oh my God.
Was it Javier Bardem as Frankenstein's monster?
Yep.
Was it?
Do you know what? Yeah. That photo is like the picture of Dorian Gray for Universal Studios. It's like the monkey's paw. It's like, we need a cinematic universe, and then it just like creaks back and the whole thing collapses. It's so, oh God.
The Mummy film was bad as well. Like, I was very surprised Tom Cruise did that, but I wonder if that was him looking ahead, like, oh, if we get to do all this for 5-10 years, and then he probably quickly thought, okay, let's get back to Mission Impossible quickly. I'll never bring it The Mummy again. But yeah, no, that is a very weird one. And kind of moving into this, I guess what I want to speak about, this might be a big conversation, I think. Creating this, so even more behind the scenes of this really surprised me, and I actually love this. This is one of my favorite things to learn. Spielberg created a think tank. When this film entered production in the late 90s, he brought together 15 experts of the future. I think a few of them are scientists, spread out, and they all came together to create this vision of what will the world be like in 2054. Obviously fictional, but with some potential real life, things popping up in there. This could happen in theory. And they called it the 2054 Bible, which is really random, but understandable. And this is what's kind of sort of blown me away, because this is, I guess, even before talking about the film, just talking about this world. Paul, you mentioned earlier that when you watch them when you're younger, it's about what future cities could look like. Obviously, I'm not talking about like how it shocks. We'll get into that later on, but the actual world feels very real, and I genuinely believe it's because they've said it's the year 2054, but they've consciously put time and effort into looking at a future. Even minor things like the newspapers that animate themselves, that's basically like refreshing on a tablet these days. That's not far off the technology. And I kind of want to ask you both, like, how do you feel with that in mind? Because I think if the future aspect didn't work of this being a fictional science fiction film, I don't think this would work if it was set today. And I don't think this would work if it was, you get those awful films like the future's 30 years from now, everything looks the exact same. This feels so fresh and different.
It's interesting as well, because like if you think about like Back to the Future, like Part 2, when they did 2015, and it was hoverboards and great big things, and you're a bit like, yeah, you were kind of off a little bit. It's a Spielberg production, whereas this one, it's not that far off. Pretty much everything is done with your eyes now. I mean, if you think about, I have an iPhone. Essentially, unlocking it with your face ID, is essentially the iClick thing that they have in Minority Report. So essentially, and you can open your computer with your face. You can do stuff like that. Pretty soon, I reckon pretty soon banks will be doing it as well. Like if you want to check your bank account, I reckon they'll do that. So that whole thing of the eye clicking stuff, I think, is here basically. That's what Face ID is, and that stuff about when he goes into one of the stores to buy something, he goes to get clothes for one of the characters, and all the stuff recognizes he's got the fake eyes in, but they're like, Mr. Yamamoto, were you happy with your purchase? They kind of have that. When you go into certain stores and you type in your ID or something, the clerks are basically told you need to be personal with the person and be like, good afternoon. For me, it'd be like, good afternoon, Paul. I see you were here 3 weeks ago to buy this. So again, it's kind of here. It's kind of happened already. It's not, that far off, like in terms of even just like the little technology stuff, the cereal box as well. I mean, it has the hologram. I reckon give it 5 more years and we'll probably have it. So I think that they were really, I don't know how much of it is just the natural progression or how much of it is people, scientists see a film and then go, we want to do that. Because I know Tesla based a lot of his, not Tesla, Elon Musk has based a lot of his stuff on things he liked from films. That's why his cars go up to 11. So I don't know how much of it is the film influencing the science and science influencing the film, and it's kind of a cycle. But yeah, I mean, we're basically there.
Yeah. I'd 100% agree that we're essentially there in this weird dystopian future of personal tracking and adverts that pretty much tell you what you want based on your previous searches. I mean, the technology behind it is different, but the ideas or the idea of it is exactly the same as what we're having now. So I was reading a good article on the Atlantic by a guy called David Sims, and he described the tracking system in it as mundanely frightening, which I think is it's a really good descriptive, because it's something that the people in this world essentially just take for granted, but it's the idea behind it that that is essentially invading your privacy. They're taking your retinal scans. They can use it for tracking. It's frighteningly similar to some of the tech that's out there now. Obviously, the privacy thing is something that is addressed and is you are essentially presented with this idea in the film and essentially said, well, what are your thoughts on it? Which is the best, what science fiction does best. But yeah, I mean the fact that they got a whole group of people from like transport to scientists and things like that to wasn't it in Venice they went to and just sort of had a jolly old time talking about what the future might look like. And some of the stuff that's come out of it is frighteningly accurate.
Yeah, well, targeted ads are here. Like you do one Google search, and Facebook suddenly, bombards your page, going, you look up one thing, go like, when was the Battle of Britain, and then suddenly all your targeted ads are like World of Warfare. Yeah, and it's like I looked up one thing.
So recently I posted on social media on my Films and Beer Twitter profile that I was going to start a YouTube channel for it, and within 2 minutes I was already getting like, oh, here's how you can up your subs on your YouTube. It's just like, oh my god, what? Jeez, we're living in like.
Did it say just do a ridiculous reactionary thumbnail, get some red laser eyes on, get a bright yellow background? and you're good to go. And just
say
be
the
outrageous
word
or something.
woke. Just say the
Yeah,
word
that's it.
woke.
Put woke
Yeah.
full exclamations. Or back in my day. But we'll plug Tom's YouTube at the end, because plot twist, by the time this video comes out in 2 weeks, Tom's like angry, reacted to Prey, to everything else. Oh my god, a woman against a predator. Disgusting. Some people will say.
Like,
I'm joking. Tom's not like that. Tom's not like that.
One thing I do like about the design of the future is that the technology is the future, but the clothing is like, you get when you see future stuff and everyone's got like weird 80s style shoulder pads and stuff, and it's like he's just wearing a leather jacket. It's just, fashion doesn't change that much.
Right. Which actually, this is slight tangent, but going off on sort of the fashion of the time. It's why I like the new modern Star Trek films, because people actually wear clothes. Whereas you look at old Star Trek shows, they just wear nonsense.
Yeah, they're just wearing like full body condoms.
Yeah,
so weird.
They are. So people don't
bizarre.
like. There are no casual clothes. Like it's
also
that...
it's like the houses and the buildings aren't, like the pre-crime building is a bit futuristic, but that's clearly been built for purpose. Whereas, when you have the opening sequence in the houses, they're just houses. Yeah. It's not floating houses made of steel. It's a brick house, because what architecture does is it just builds on top of what exists. So you have like when you go through London, you'll have half a street will be Victorian era cobbled brick, and then it'll be steel. Or it will be half a brick building with a new structure on top. Just build on top of what exists. So I quite like that they didn't go, let's redesign everything and everything's going to be chrome and look like the Apple store. But you wouldn't. If a house exists and it's fine, you just leave it as is.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Like, because I was watching some behind the scenes, and they were talking about the DC's district zoning permission and planning stuff, and how it's a city and it's a district that's just going to have all these monuments still there, even years in the future. But the way the zoning works, you can't build anything new or can't build skyscrapers in specific areas. So that's all pushed outwards, which I think is really cool. So it takes into account what is already there, the sort of the building permission that's already in existence, and takes it a step further. So if that was in place, then in the future, well, cities
and you would just build massive high rises, like that whole sequence when he goes to get his eyes done, and it's just it looks like a grotty high rise, and then they say, oh, he's in one of those new tenement buildings, and they're like, there's like 50 of them in a row, and it's like, that's what you do. Like, that's what social housing is we can't build outwards, we build upwards. So you just build flat upon flat, like, and again, London is exactly the same. It's just flats on top of each other, built in exactly the same style. So again, I think Spielberg's clever to look at what is around, and what's been around for 100 years, it will still be there in another 50 of just build flats. And Tom Cruise's one's a little bit nicer. He's got a big open plan, and his car goes right up to like the window, and it's a bit futuristic. Then he's the chief of the pre-crime, so he's like a police commissioner type. He gets paid big money for his job. He's going to have a nice flat. Your backstreet eye doctor is going to have a horrible apartment. So again, it's not. He's not just gone over the top. Let's just go crazy Apple Store future. The thought in it is there. It makes sense.
Also, just a quick side note. Sorry, George. I just sort of dominated.
No, I really like it. It's a big thing for this film.
But just a very quick side note. I'm sure we'll get onto it. But I absolutely find Peter Stormare's sneezing really disgusting.
Oh my god, that is
globular snot coming out of his nose.
It's such a gross movie. The whole film is so gross. Like, that was my big takeaway, like, from rewatching it, is It's so gross. Him
Yeah,
eating
yeah.
the rotten food and then he's like drinking the eye juice. It's such a gross film. It's so disgusting.
And that's what makes it so great. It's like how uncomfortable you can be watching it as well. And it builds not character, it builds the environment that it's not, as you said, it's not some like pristine Apple Store future that I know that a lot of films have done and all that. And actually, one thing I want to talk about, even some things are fictional, like the jetpacks on the officers. Spielberg's like, yeah, this was never going to happen. It's just that I like jetpacks growing up. So I thought, why not? And I was like, and you're allowed to do that. And even the car designs. Did anyone else think of the light cycles from the original Tron? Because
Yeah,
I always just like they're sidewards Tron vehicles, and 2002. It's only 20 years after Tron's come out, so it's probably still an idea of future of the car industry, and maybe some today. I mean, iRobot. If anyone saw that, that's very similar when they build their futuristic world, and they're almost like the Tron things too. And it's just really exciting. I think fundamentally, if you don't build the correct future in this film, so much of it won't work. But because it's so dystopian, it all plays into the hands of the story, of what's going on. And kind of what we'll segue into, actually, before even story, I want to talk about Spielberg's directors, because we mentioned him a lot. And I kind of mentioned this is one of his more, I say thought-provoking films is probably better than what he said. I can't remember what I said, but it wasn't smart. And I feel that his approach to this is fascinating because AI was his previous film. And Tomini spoke how, not they're ahead of the time talking about global warming, but global warming is a big part of that film. For something that was in production in the the 80s, 90s, and everything. And obviously here we are today with natural crisis. I've already mentioned the heat waves today as well. It's really interesting that back-to-back films of Spielberg's is this dystopian future.
Yeah.
And we've really seen, because we know Spielberg can do sci-fi. He's, he Close Encounters, E.T., but they've always felt like science fiction coming into today's world, where seeing Spielberg get the chance to look ahead to the future, I think is really exciting as a viewer. And certainly in this one, as we mentioned the last 10 minutes, the building of the world is so key. And his maturity as director, he probably couldn't have done that had it been in the 80s. He probably wouldn't have done that in the 80s. And we spoke so much of his 90s films over the last few weeks that this is the point of his career where he not just matured, but he was right at the top of his game. Probably like peak Spielberg. A lot of people say the 90s, but it certainly to me spills out into the noughties. And just his approach to this with the idea, the premise, and how it's executed, I genuinely think, I mean, I'm not going to say it's one of his best films because you could say that about pretty much all of his films, but this is, to me, is probably sat in my top 10 of his. And a lot of it is because he's raising these ideals, but what he does, he's not sort of slapping you in the face with themes and ideas. He's sort of placing you into the story at hand to observe and make of it your own judgment, which I thought was far more interesting as a viewer. And certainly yesterday, not talking about the style of him yet, but just how do we feel about his direction with this? Certainly also having an A-lister like Tom Cruise, him directing Cruise, and some, I'd say one big up-and-coming actor in Colin Farrell, some legendary stuff for Max von Sydow. It's a real interesting cast, and I just going to jump to it. I don't think many directors would have been able to have pulled this film off without losing the audience.
It's an interesting one because his direction in it as well is that even though it's in the future, he's making a film noir. It's a noir, and it looks like a noir movie, and it's such an interesting, and obviously it's got the Philip K. Dick connection of the short story and Blade Runner. But if you look at Blade Runner, I think Blade Runner got lost in the design. I think Ridley Scott got lost building a world. The story suffers, in my opinion. I know people love it, but for me. Whereas with this one, I think Spielberg was like, I want a world, but the story has to it has to play a part. You can't just stop the film to suddenly go, look at how we deal with this. It's like each story beat then introduces more of the world into it. And even like the opening, I think, is so confident because it just drops you into this. It's almost like you were talking about James Bond before we came on. It's like a pre-title James Bond sequence.
Yeah,
him going, the red ball drops, the other ball drops. You're getting exposition through action and action through exposition, all this stuff. And Spielberg doesn't. he kind of he's like, don't worry, we'll explain, we show it, then we'll explain it afterwards. And you kind of just go with it, and you're piecing it together as they piece it together, like this murder that's about to happen. And I think that is so confident that can only come from a director who has, mastered every genre, that he can then start blending genres and go, I'm going to do sci-fi and film noir at the same time. It's, that can only come from someone who has done everything.
Yeah. I remember in some behind the scenes that I was watching, just for context, literally an hour and a half ago, before this, I'd finished my my rewatch. I think he said he told Janusz Kaminski, the director of photography, that he wants it to be his grottiest, sort of dirtiest film. Which I thought was, it does look really grimy and horrible. But I think this is so with what adaptions of how Spielberg tackles adaptions, and this will sort of play into War of the Worlds as well. I think what tends to happen, he takes the ideas of the stories themselves, so the Philip K. Dick short story, which I think doesn't really have a conclusion. It's just sort of a really short sort of premise. Piece so he takes those, and it's the same with War of the Worlds as well. He takes the ideas, but sort of morphs them to fit modern, not sensibilities, but sort of warps them into so that the stories fit in the modern time. I think that's very much the case here, and also War of the Worlds, which will get to in a couple of weeks. But his direction in this, I think, is very good, and he does take the ideas and presents them to you rather than beats you over the head and says this is what my film's about, which I do like in terms of science fiction, because if you get hit over the head too much with it's okay, I understand your film's about this and that, and can you just get on with the story? One of the things I actually do really enjoy as well is that Spielberg's incorporation of sort of father-son motif that he's had throughout many of his other works, but not necessarily about the relationship between father and son. It's more sort of, even that is twisted to father losing his son and his what his interpretation of the emotion behind that. And I think that's the through line that really carries the film. Everything else is just sort of not window dressing, but it's there to serve this through line of how someone deals with trauma, because that's primarily at its very core what the film is really ultimately about, and all the sort of privacy, the free will determinism discussion is very much there, but at the center is this really human story, which I think is really, really good, and Spielberg does it fantastically well.
No, it's really good. I'm kind of going to combine what we both said. Paul, you mentioned noir, and Tommy speaking about some of the production stuff. Watching this yesterday, it's almost like inverted film noir, rather than the darkness with this sort of slight white. You think blinds, don't you? Like shut blinds and stuff. This is like, let's make this as bright and uncomfortable as possible for us to view. And just reading into how they came to, as you mentioned, you had Janusz, they shot on, I think, Super 8 cameras, so there'd be more grain off that, which it's a big thing. In 2002, Spielberg's best friend pushing digital technology, Spielberg shoots it on film to help get the grain, and they had the negatives bleached after, which I've never really been familiar with film in that regard. Like when someone says you bleach a negative, whenever I've heard it in the past, I'm like, are you literally like dipping like film reels like in bleach? I've never really understood it. So
I've just gone and got some Mr. Muscle from
yeah, that's literally what I think of. Like, here's like we're just gonna plug this all over the film reel now, because I've always been like curious by things like that, and obviously the film's completely overlit, and I just think stylistically this stands out above not all of Spielberg's, because that sort of sounds like a compliment, but there's no Spielberg film that looks like this. And I'd say his films, they don't have a particularly distinct look. You know how some directors are very like polished, sleek, like a J.J. Abrams. They always say like the iPhone sort of thing, don't they? Of the Abrams films, how they're lit. You've obviously got a lot of the lighting. Whereas a Spielberg film, you always know it's a Spielberg film based on what you're feeling and what you're viewing, but never the actual production design. And this one, it's so unique to this film, and it just builds up what we spoke about with this is the future of 2054. Obviously, it wouldn't look like that if you're living in it, but for the viewer at home, it's to really separate the reality. And I'm actually going to jump in with this as well. What I thought, which really not surprised me, the visual effects for 2002 look phenomenal. And again, I've got a nice upscaling 4K Blu-ray player or whatever, but nowadays, when you get these modern films getting remastered or everything, the VFX, certainly the early noughties, pop out a lot more because it's the beginning of the era, the new technology era. All the style and everything I've mentioned really enhances those visuals, which has actually aged the film so well. I don't know if anyone ever noticed or thought of that, but I was really surprised at how well I thought the CG looked. And it is because of the way the film is presented to us as the audience. It's got this unique feeling. I just think that really does help age it because, again, I don't mind when CGI pops out on older films. It's a new technology at the time. The industry is changing and evolving. But for this, I was really surprised about how well it blended in. And I think also, obviously, there's a lot of practical sets being used as well.
Yeah, I think he was, again, and it's similar, like we said on Jurassic Park, he's clever to mix the two. He never... now, like if you go Ready Player One, he's full CGI, but he was clever. Like that chase sequence with the cars, that's half a CGI thing, half Tom Cruise on an actual, car running and jumping onto another platform, and you merge the two. So it's never solely reliant on the computer or solely reliant on the thing. And I think as well, the CGI focuses on certain things like little spider critters, the cameras with the legs. They're CGI, but because it's one part of a set, you can really zone in on it. And I think, the CGI has aged impeccably because it's augmented with real people and real sets and stuff. Where you can, he's one of those. If you can do it practically, it's probably better just to do it practically and to enhance later on.
Yeah. I mean, it does help as well working with geniuses at ILM who just are wizards at everything.
Have you just watched the documentary, Tom?
I haven't. No, it's on my list.
It's a great plug. So it sounded like you just watched it and you're like, I'm going to plug the ILM thing because if anyone hasn't seen it, Light and Magic is honestly one of the best documentaries I've seen. And the only criticism I have, it should have been 3 seasons because they get to Jurassic Park after 6 episodes covering 17 years. It's like, boom, last 20 minutes, it's just skipped 30 years of film history. And Spielberg's in it a lot for anyone watching this. He basically says, I will just always come to ILM no matter what. Which is really exciting because they're fantastic.
I was just thinking of them because visual effects artists need a lot of love at the moment.
100 unionized visual effects artists for anyone that might be watching. To get into that, I was going to make a joke about the 2054 future into the Tory leadership, but I'm even too scared to consider that. So I won't be here. That'll be the thing. None of us will at this rate. But moving on swiftly from them. Oh God. Okay, we spoke about direction. We spoke about his style. Do we want to talk about the story and themes? This sounds a bit silly because we spoke, I guess, a lot about it. But how do we sort of tailoring in? How do we feel on the concept that in this, this utopian future, crime? Because it's something everyone's probably thought in their lifetime, not because of this film. But there's everyone, even as a child, you probably has thoughts. What if somebody knew that someone was going to do a crime? Can you stop them? And what I kind of like and appreciate is this film is more so the ethics of that, also putting the practicality in person. Just jumping in, yes, Tom Cruise did shoot someone in the end, but the guy made him shoot him, and it was all a setup in the process. So on that black and white, precog vision, yes, Tom Cruise killed him. But the reality was a very, very differing thing. How do we feel about just that concept that the film revolves around it being the police, being the future, and it almost being a bill they're trying to nationalize in the States? Because I think it's very, very fascinating as a viewer. And I don't think I've ever seen a film tackle this in a similar manner, probably because this film did such a fantastic job of doing so.
Yeah, I feel as well when you talk about Minority Report and when you talk about War of the Worlds, which we'll get to in Munich, they form a kind of trilogy, like with regards to kind of this post 9/11 feeling Spielberg has. And, you know, we'll get to War of the Worlds, but War of the Worlds very much is how does a father deal with a threat to his children that he cannot understand? Munich is very much about what is the cost of a country wanting revenge on, you know, on another country for the actions of a few. And for me, Minority Report is very much Spielberg going, all right, you've put the Patriot Act into effect. And for those who don't know, Patriot Act was basically George Bush's reaction to 9/11 was, if you suspect people are terrorists, you have the legal authority to detain them without a release date. So that's the whole Guantanamo Bay. And that led to a lot of innocent people being put in Guantanamo Bay. There's a great documentary called The Road to Guantanamo about these 4 Muslim guys from the UK who were just put in prison because they went to, I believe it was Iraq or Pakistan, on a jolly, and they were put in Guantanamo Bay indefinitely and tortured, and, you know, because America went, they might be terrorists. They've got, you know, they know a guy who knew a guy who was a terrorist. And I feel like this is such a Patriot Act criticism of, you can arrest someone for something you think they might do. And, you know, you get arrested on suspicion of murder, but you need proof. And a vision that is not 100% all the time is not concrete proof. And that whole thing, you know, there's that good argument where Colin Farrell says, but it hasn't happened. And Tom Cruise rolls the ball along the thing and he catches it. And he says, why did you catch it? And he said it was going to fall, but it didn't. But it was going to, but it didn't. So there's the argument. And you kind of think, yeah, yeah, but still, you can't just lock someone, you know, and punishment is they get their brain frazzled and they get put in a cylinder forever. There's no concrete proof. You know, justice generally has to be after the point, you know.
Yeah.
Although you get attempted murder, but you're still attempting the murder. It, you know, wanting to do something is not doing it. You know, saying, I want to kill that guy is not killing that guy. You know, saying, God, I wish I could burn down my place of work is not burning down your place of work. And I think it's such an interesting Bush critique. That, and the fact that, you know, when you get into like box office, it was a huge success because people wanted blockbusters. And yet Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg are literally there going, what the government are doing is a bad thing. It's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, you've got a really good bit as well in it where you know these characters in pre-crime are essentially have brought so heavily on board, are like, you know, they are indoctrinated into this idea that the precogs can't be wrong, that there is no doubt in anyone's mind that they show things that you are going to do, not things that you will do or things that you think about doing. It comes back to the free will determinism thing where, you know, are the things that are being shown, do you have a choice in them, or are you free to choose at the very end of it? Well, like Tom Cruise, like Anderton does at the end, you know, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to arrest you instead. He has a choice in his decisions. And I think that's sort of the fundamental flaw in the argument of, well, but it was going to happen regardless. Well, that's not really true, because people have their own, people can change their minds. And whilst it's very good that the creators of this pre-crime unit essentially just sort of covered up and deleted all the stuff about Minority Reports, and how if one of them disagrees, or one of the precogs disagrees on what's the outcome is, then that sort of puts in doubt the whole system. And if the system goes, then the thing that they're trying to get through just completely collapses, and the justice system essentially collapses. And you have a really good moment where Anderton is in the greenhouse talking to one of the creators of the precogs, and he said, "Well, geez, what about all the people that I've put away that are likely innocent?" He has that moment, a very brief moment of self-realization that the system is flawed. I think it's very good critique on that as well.
Yeah,
no,
I think the thing with the Max von Sydow character with Burgess is that he's again, to go back to the Patriot Act thing, he's doing what Bush did. He's playing on Tom Cruise's emotional fear. He's playing on, your son went missing and is probably dead, but pre-crime could have stopped that. If pre-crime was around 6 years ago, your son would still be here. And, Bush did the same thing. If we had arrested Muslims, then 9/11 wouldn't have happened and your friends and family would still be alive. It's that same appeal to fear thing of, this awful thing happened, but if you let me do this, it will never happen again. And it's like, that's not necessarily true. You don't know that he was abducted. Like, I think that's a great thing about the film, is it actually never resolves that child storyline. He may have just wandered off. He may have fallen down something. He may have been abducted. He may not. You never know. And it's that kind of, there's a real darkness to the film that, again, I think Spielberg is a guy who believes in America as it should be, not as it is. And looking back on previous episodes and stuff that will come again, I think Spielberg is a patriot in as much as he believes in the pursuit of happiness and what the Constitution should be about. Is very critical of what actually happens, in regards to what happened with slavery, war. And I think 9/11 was very much him going, this is not what we're about. We're not about punishing innocent people on an off chance. And that whole microcosm of Tom Cruise's grief has led to him essentially, potentially, ruining the lives of innocent people, mainly men.
I think everything's been said is wonderful. And what kind of adds to it, which makes it scary, is that when you realize this film shot before 9/11, like months before 9/11, obviously you had posts, probably pickups, but it's almost ahead of its time by a literal several months, which is actually terrifying to think of as well. But at the same time, obviously, again, I won't remember the politics at the time, but I'm sure there were many, not Cold War things, but the Cold War obviously happened. And there had been very much that conversation for probably many years within politicians, within circles. And kind of what you said there, Paul, with the Spielberg stuff, even Lucas, his like best friend, Star Wars, it's America's the empire. They always have been. And it's like when people, don't get politics out of Star Wars. How dare you say Cassian might be a bit Trumpism? Why? George Lucas has said it from the get-go, and the prequels is Bush's eras of becoming the empire, i.e. what happened post 9/11 as well. And it's really fascinating when you have these filmmakers, and going back to the beginning of this series, Tommy joined me right at the start on the first few episodes. The Spielberg's generation, I say that it's more the Brat Pack, isn't it? It's Lucas, Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola. I forgot, there's probably one or two more I missed. That group, they broke the studio system. They wouldn't be a part of the studio system. They altered the industry to their own. And as they've got older, we're now seeing this studio system slowly coming back into place because we're losing the value of. I'm the same as you, but I don't like saying autos too much. It just seems such an up itself term. But we're losing that now, and there's only a select handful that are willing to stick the middle finger up to a studio. Christopher Nolan, i.e., how great does he look that he left Warner Brothers last year? Again, it's that kind of insanity. And
It's because it had already happened in his timeline. He did the Tenet thing, and it went backwards to quit before it happened.
Yeah, and it's frightening, and it's just amazing because I don't think I hate saying you don't get a film like this today because it sounds like the morons that cry about work, but I don't think you would get a studio backing a film of this with $100 million budget today. I think they'd rely on it being like an A24, here's $10 million type thing that no one's going to watch. But the people involved in this, and as you've kind of said as well, that even Tom Cruise, that for all intents and purposes, I don't want to get in like a whole Top Gun military propaganda thing, but if anyone's ever seen these incredible interviews from the late 80s where he'd refused a Top Gun 2 at the time. They wanted to do multiple Top Guns before the first had even come out, and he'd been very against it. And I think there's even these theories. I've not seen Born on the 4th of July, but there's these incredible theories that Tom Cruise was like almost an apology for Top Gun. Was that? Now that's a bit of an extremity, saying it's an apology from him. But this perspective of he doesn't strike me as an American flag wave. Although we do have Top Gun Maverick now, which I know that the military is involved in the scripting, I believe, he isn't to me this perfect American patriot. What I would say with the Tom Cruise nowadays, he's just probably very politically neutral in terms of public eye. We don't hear about we don't hear about Scientology anymore. We don't hear about his personal life. He's very much presented this persona of maybe it's the real Tom Cruise, the champion of the cinema, the insane stunts, the actor, the producer. And it's really interesting that, again, him and Spielberg delving into that real life politics set in an amplified future. It really, again, the casual person wouldn't view this and make those connections. But I think not we're smart enough to do so, but it's when you read into the inner text and what they're really trying to tell you is so much more than just this science fiction story of Tom Cruise, trying to not get away with not murdering someone. It's a really interesting debate. Have I feel like I've oversold that? I'm sort of curious if that actually makes any sense to anyone too.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to this with War of the Worlds because I really think that War of the Worlds was a big moment in Cruise's career where I don't know for certain. I think he had some kind of a breakdown. I think he had a complete, not psychotic episode, seems a bit harsh, but I think he had some kind of thing. Because if you look at him pre-2000, I mean, he was a Scientologist since like 89 or something. It's nowhere in his work, in his interviews, anything at all. And then in 2005, he goes nuts. He has a complete freak out. He's doing crazy stuff. He's going on interviews talking about drugging kids and how it's wrong and all this sort of stuff. And I don't think he ever fully recovered. I mean, box office aside, I don't think a lot of people are maybe a bit like, I don't want to go near that guy. I know he had a bust up with Spielberg, and we'll get to that. But if you look at Top Gun, that is a big military piece of propaganda. The Navy were outside cinemas to recruit people.
Yeah. And
then he does Born on the 4th of July, which is about PTSD. It's about the cost of war. And even A Few Good Men is about a court case against a respected general for an ends justifies the means operation. And again, it feels like him going, maybe I made a mistake. And I don't know what Scientology's done. They're scary. They terrify the shit out of me. I don't want to get on their wrong side. But it feels interesting with Tom Cruise that you would have Top Gun in the 80s when there was a war, when there was a president who was an actor, who understood the power of movies to recruit people. And then you get Top Gun, and who was the president when that was greenlit? Donald Trump. What does Donald Trump wish he was? He wishes he was an actor. He wishes he was a movie star. And it's an interesting kind of, I don't know what's happened with Cruise. Maybe one day it will come out. I think there's something more going on because in the 90s and early 2000s, he had a lot to say movie-wise about the world. He had a lot to say about politics. He had a lot to say about society. That first Mission Impossible, again, is all about spying, country. Should you spy? Should you break in? If you go against the government, is it wrong to go against the government if the government is wrong? And this as well is it wrong to commit a crime if the crime you're committing is right? It's it baffles me. There is a fascinating expose on Tom Cruise, I think, is waiting for him to die. That is going to, unleash the floodgates of what happened after 2005, because it's so weird.
Tom?
To be honest, I have nothing that can top what Paul has just come out with. So
Party political podcast aside.
I'll be the politically neutral party and go, yes, that is a thing that happens.
Scientology is not going to come.
Very interesting.
It does bring up good questions, because to be fair, I didn't realize that Spielberg and Cruise had a major bust up. Essentially, that's one of the things that sort of passed me by, at least. There is a thing to be said about Cruise's what's the phrase I'm sort of looking for? His
personal life.
Yeah, his disassociation from his films to his actual public persona, his personal life. And I mean, one of the things that post the breakdown, where he was running around Oprah. Was it Oprah?
The Katie Holmes stuff, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah. I love Katie Holmes, and he's like pushing her hands.
It's so mental, but it's so bizarre. I think you're right. We will get, like, in a few years, even I think when he's probably still alive, he'll come out with this is what happened early on in my career and in the mid 2000s. But one of the things that I was going to say, that it's weird, because now when you hear him in interviews and when you hear people speak about Cruise, they're actually very positive. It's like a positive, he is it seems like he is a person that will listen to what you have to say, regardless of your affiliation to or your opinion on his background, essentially. But it does feel like he's shifted from being that sort of crazy person to being someone that sort of has looked back at that and gone, well, yeah, that was really idiotic and stupid. Maybe I'll change my persona to be, I'll engage with people in conversation. Because it was only yesterday that one of the guys I play football with on Saturdays essentially said his girlfriend works at Selfridges, and Tom Cruise was there trying to buy for like an hour, struggling to buy chocolate, and like engage in.
We love London, though.
Yeah, and it's and apparently he was very nice to talk to, and just really sort of positive. So I think maybe that's stems from his background in like the mid 2000s, where he absolutely went ballistic and just.
I still love that story about him having a curry and liking it so much.
Birmingham.
He had another one. That is the most I've ever loved him.
On that podcast mentioned at the start, Chris McQuarrie, everyone from Mission Impossible was on it. They're all on set. They're all on a Zoom call, and they said that Chris McQuarrie says every time there's an article about an actor or something, they always share it to see, look how fake this is, look at this. And Chris McQuarrie says he was so shocked at the Tom Cruise curry one. They said, why? And he goes, because every single thing in the article was true. Nothing was fictionalized. He did sit with normal people. He met, my older sister, the story is she was actually in Birmingham that day because they were shooting Mission Impossible at Birmingham International Train Station. So she didn't know it was that. I was gutted because I'd have probably gone, actually. But it's amazing you get this. And I think you're both right that there is this, certainly to me, again, I started getting to stuff in like 2014, 15, around the time at Edge of Tomorrow. And you had that vibe very much of Tom Cruise is the weirdo, the small guy, the Scientologist. And I would certainly say, as a fan of his a bit more in depth for the last 8 years, the public persona has really shifted towards him again. And it's almost like he's become an A-lister once more. He probably wasn't not an A-lister. But when in like 2012, someone said Tom Cruise is the biggest action star ever,
they didn't do great, though. Those
Exactly.
Edge of Tomorrow did okay. It did fine,
but it wasn't. It didn't light the world on fire. Like
the reason,
Top Gun and
the reason why a sequel has sort of languished is that it did well on DVD and it did well on Blu-ray and download. Because I worked at a cinema when it came out, nobody was going to see it, and people were like, "Is the movie star dead?" When a Will Smith sci-fi film like After Earth is not doing great, when a Brad Pitt zombie movie is just about turning a profit, and when a Tom Cruise sci-fi film is only just
broke
nudging,
even, I think.
Yeah, and it
Just
you know, Night and Day did not do well. You know, a lot of the Tom Cruise star vehicles, you know, the Mummy tanking is bad when you have Tom Cruise headlining an action horror film based on an IP. You know, people love the Mummy. People like the Mummy Returns.
I think that's why
hate the third one. Yeah, I mean,
because no one wanted a new Mummy film.
If it was a legacy sequel with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz and John Hannah as old people fighting the Mummy in like 1950 whatever, that film would be doing Avengers money. I'm telling you now. They need to get Brendan Fraser quick, because he's, you know, if The Whale is as good as people say it is, they need to get that Mummy 4 off the ground.
And it's a shame we won't get a Batgirl to see him in a blockbuster as well. Thanks, Warner Brothers. But
I'm
no,
still upset.
It's fascinating.
Still upset.
And even like I was lucky to meet him. So I went to the Mission Impossible premiere in 2018. And as I said, I've done a lot of red carpets. I met a lot of people. I don't brag, but I do brag, sorry. And, you know, the way they work is you don't get time with them. You don't get time, you know. You see them on TV, they're signing their selfies. They can't stand and chat. They've got to move down. They've got interviews to do. It's a great environment, but it's tough. And also you get like psycho autograph dealers, which puts off actors from wanting to meet people. Because everyone's judge, is this a fan or is this a dealer? And Tom Cruise is the only one I've ever seen where he has spent time with every single person. I was at the BFI Max. It was lovely, talked to him to summer day. And even when I spoke to him for like a few minutes, I had an Edge of Tomorrow poster that he signed. I obviously got a photo with him. He was so nice to everyone. And I was kind of nervous because I didn't think like every red carpet you'd get time with them. And then after he was done me, he said, "Do you mind just moving over to the side I'd like to speak to the people behind you." I've never had that at red carpet in my life. Them asking to get to the people behind. And he was so nice to everybody there that day. And it's really eye-opening for me that, again, like, this sounds like horrible because it's detracts from the review, but is this him repairing his public image? Or is this the real Tom Cruise that he's genuinely like this? And we've seen him at so many sporting events over the last few years, even at the F1 recently. He gave the interview to Sky on the pits. Not everyone does that. And he said straight away, Lewis Hamilton's my guy who's going to win. And I just want to throw out this, by the way. The Joseph Kosinski F1 film that Hamilton's producing, if Tom Cruise doesn't have a cameo at least, or is in that to a degree, I will be so disappointed. And I don't think they'll make that Cruise.
Make him drive.
Or just in a car, or a principal or something. But
make him the
it's
villain.
Really interesting.
Make him the bad guy. He's the rival driver.
And this is it with Cruise. I think his career, it has been this steady build-up of the last 8 years that you were starting to get. You're getting flops, you're getting ones turning even. The Mission Impossibles are grossing more. And sort of Top Gun's hit this new peak for him where, I think he's waved that flag for cinemas. Everyone's turned up, and I think even audiences, I don't want to get into a Top Gun thing, but the dynamic of we're bored of visual effects heavy films that look crap, not the artist's fault. We're bored of the same 4 Marvel films and 4 Marvel shows a year. Give us something new. Give us something exciting. Okay, yes, it's a sequel. But it had character development, which, it was Tom Cruise accepting his sort of mortality as an older pilot. And it had visual practical effects. It had fantastic action. And I think, again, he's probably, to me, like on the same status as he was 20 years ago, if I'm being really blunt. I think when the next Mission Impossible, the next 2 come out, it's going to be insane. And this film of him going to space, shooting practically, just only Tom Cruise is the combination for that, right? Like only Tom Cruise is going to be the actor that gets flown to space to do a film. And it's exciting. And I'm trying to bring it back to Minority Report, but I just think roles like this, he's not been able to do since. But I think, if it is true, he's going to sort of take lesser roles or drop off the action post Mission Impossible 7 and 8, I think. I think he probably would do stuff, but it's again, what's not letting be seen from the public? Is it repairing an image? Is there, I mean, I don't know the cult of Scientology, but I've heard stories about, once you're in, you're locked in. They make sure you're locked in. I think I always get the Threws mixed up. The one that does documentaries, not the actor.
No, Louis.
He did a really interesting documentary on them a few years back. So it's really interesting with Tom Cruise. And kind of segueing, how do we all feel about Anton? We spoke about him a lot. We spoke about him, the character. Are we all with him? Like, do we like him as a lead? Because I think he suits a Spielberg film, and not just with the sort of the dead son split family narrative. I think you look at him and it's Tom Cruise, but at the same time, it genuinely feels like Tom Cruise playing a character more so than Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise.
He looks shit in the whole film. He looks dreadful. Like, obviously, because he's meant to be a drug addict, so he looks really tired. And even. Tom Cruise, for a man who's like 60, has a fantastic head of hair, and he frequently in films has a great big luscious bonnet. And if you look like, the joke in Mission Impossible was short hair, long hair, short hair, long hair, and then you look at this and it's like he's almost bald. It's so short, and it's kind of almost atypical for him. And the whole film is him. Well, Tom Cruise got to run, and there's plenty of running, but it's him running and looking like he is sweating profusely, which you don't get in the Mission Impossibles and the Top Guns and stuff. In those, he looks great the whole time. Whereas in this, he looks like he's been kicked through walls. He looks terrible. And I think it works. It's that Spielberg works with movie stars, but he kind of makes them not look glamorous. Indiana Jones, by the end of a film, looks dreadful, and by the end of this, Tom Cruise looks awful.
Yeah, I will say it's not necessarily my favorite sort of Tom Cruise performance, but I think he is good in it, and you can pretty much. This may be a bit of a generalization, but I think you can pretty much. If Tom Cruise is in a film, it's 70 to 80% he's going to be good in it. I think you can gauge. Yeah. There's like the odd occasion where it's the Mummy, and it's like really bad stuff that he's been in, but those are very few and far between. So you can generally tell that if Cruise is in a film, it's generally he's going to be good in it. I think Spielberg is one of the guys to really capitalize on that. This is a time where it makes sense to have the two biggest names in Hollywood come together to make a film and subsequently make another one a couple of years after. It just makes sense. It's He's a director that gets the best out of his actors, and I think whilst I don't think Tom Cruise really sort of I mean, this is all just speculation on my part, but is not someone to really take on board although that's kind of doesn't
Let me
seem
jump
true.
in.
Yeah,
the film's almost a collaboration of Spielberg and Cruise. Like, it's all so even behind the scenes, there's reports that they were both going over that script together, and it's almost like they've came together to make this film. And not a center of what happens now with Cruise, but it's very much that here's the A-list star and the A-list direction. I think they both took salary cuts as well for this, just so they could get it under the $100 million budget. But obviously, they took percentage of the box office as the salary. But
apparently, that's a Spielberg rule. He said in an interview for Private Ryan, he didn't get a salary, he gets box office. And Tom Hanks did the same thing. He didn't take salary. And he said that if I'm going to take a risk on a film, I expect my lead to take the risk too. And also, Spielberg and Cruise can afford it. Like, they're not poor guys, they're rich. So for them to both be like, let's take this risk together, it makes it makes sense. And also it kind of the production
it also encouraged them to actually promote this film and do your job. That's why I was going to do that too.
And I know that both of them needed a quick hit. I know that Vanilla Sky didn't do great, and AI didn't do. I can't remember what but it didn't do. It wasn't like a big film, like box office wise. And I know that Mission Impossible went over schedule, over budget. AI went over schedule. I think it went over budget. I can't remember. So both of them needed a film that's going to stay under the budget and then turn a profit. And it kind of feels like the perfect storm of an actor and a director needing a hit that they can make quickly. And it's one of those things where the planets align and the perfect storm of idea, actor, director come together, and it just kind of works.
No, with you on that.
Yeah.
Tom, does that sort of help where you were going?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I it makes sense to have two of the biggest names working together at the time, and he definitely does get the best out of Cruise. Although that you could say that Tom Cruise's best is well, this is some people's opinion, maybe that isn't great, but I think he's definitely very good in it. It's not his best performance by a long shot, but then it is an action piece, and Tom Cruise does action really well.
No, exactly. And just kind of that, he also brought in his same stunt crew as Mission Impossible 2 for the car sequence, which I loved. That's that's a really low. I was watching that. I was like, you know what, this car fight's really good for a fight in a car that's being built. I've not really seen that done much before, but and that's where it works, right? Collaborations. You want your actor to bring in. If Tom Cruise knows good, I mean, I hate Mission Impossible 2. It's my least favorite by country miles. It's made it very awkward, but him bringing in his people, you got to get the green out from the director too for that. And it's this collaboration between the two of them. I think in hand make that work. And also, there's not many big stunt moments for Tom Cruise in this too. And this is again to me the Tom Cruise's own stunts thing has only really been a thing since like Rogue Nation, which is 2011. Remember when he was on Burj Khalifa? Like, it's only really been a big thing since then, as far as I'm concerned. Like, now it's like, what's he going to do next? It never used to be what's he going to do next. It was just, it's Tom Cruise.
That car sequence is so funny because we'll get to John Williams in a little bit. But that car sequence, they're having a fight, it's being built, is so much like the factory bit in Attack of the Clones. Where Anakin and Padme are trying to escape the clone building factory, and it's the same year and the same composer. And it's so bizarre that they're almost certain shots. Like, isn't there? There's a bit in it where something comes down on Tom Cruise's arm, and he pulls his arm out, and the same thing happens to Anakin. It's so funny. And also in that sequence, you have my favorite future weapon, which is the weird spinny gun that he spins to reload, and then it shoots like the boing. And again, they have that gun in Attack of the Clones. That's what the Sith are using, these weird plasma guns that shoot air bubbles at you. It's so... I don't know if Lucas and Spielberg were swapping ideas over lunch, because I know they're friends, but it's so bizarre that you have almost the identical beats in the same sequence.
No, that's a really good point, and I love it's the sound effects. It's how they react to the. It's not CGI. You're seeing actors getting thrown into boxes. It's little things like that. I think I get a bit of a kick off, and again, it's that futuristic stuff. Weapons like that probably do exist or will exist in the years to come. Because obviously they're kind of a police force that goes out and kills people. That's kind of their rule at the same time, which also comes into effect. But if we talk about some other characters, I mean, we've got a few we're going to list here. I've not got masses to say if I'm being blunt, because the core of it is obviously Tom Cruise. Lamar Burgess, played by Max von Sydow. Again, the politician, the actor that's far too good to be in one scene, so he's going to probably be villain come the end of it. I loved him in this. I think from the scenes we get them, he's great. But what I loved is it's not the revelation. It's the scare of when it's all coming together with the animation on the board. And it's really stretching. The moment in which they all say to him, like, congratulations, like, you've solved murder. Please come here with your autograph. To me, that was like really scary viewing. Not because we know he's a murderer, just that mentality of, congratulations, you've solved murder. Like it's a PlayStation game, but it's meant to be a real life. It's that kind of political element that comes into it. And it goes back to what you both said earlier with the real life politics. to me, it just adds layers to this film. And ultimately, where the film ends is Max von Sydow. You know, he has a choice. You either kill Tom Cruise, you get done for murder, and your system works, or you don't kill me, your system's broken, and it can never happen. And he chooses to kill himself, therefore validating both to a point. It's a fantastic character, and I think it's a very understated character that, whilst you've got a Tom Cruise and A-lister, you really need that sort of heavyweight, old school actor to be there with him. The supporting actors are as key to this film, if I'm being honest, as Tom Cruise is.
Yeah, Spielberg, time and time again, just gets great actors, even for like one. There's a lot of actors who are only in one or two scenes, but von Sydow, also because he's the Exorcist in The Exorcist, so he's played Jesus. He's played like the most virtuous men all around. He's also played Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon, so he's played the most evil man. And when he comes on screen, he's got such a long face, like he's got this long face, but this mouth that takes up his whole face when he talks, and he just got such a tired gravity that when he's doing stuff about saying like how much he hates honey and how much he hates herbal tea, you kind of just buy into almost like a John Hammond type. You're just like, that's just a nice old guy. And I think he's great casting, because when you get, when Colin Farrell starts figuring it all out, and he's like, but why would you do this if that was this and this was that? And he starts clocking that Tom Cruise might be innocent. The way that von Sydow kind of starts, his posture changes, and he starts to get tenser, and he's like, I've been rumbled. That it's such a great villainous turn. It's so clever.
Yeah, he's definitely, it seems like he's very much an actor that doesn't need much in the way of direction, because he's gonna bring his A game to whatever he's in, and he just brings gravitas to anything, and he is the one actor you think that even if it's a bad film, Sydow's in it, he's going to be really good in it.
He doesn't phone in. He brings 100%.
Yeah,
whether he's doing a piece of crap or he's doing a guest spot in a show, he is 100% committed. I think that works because Cruise as well, to his credit, is 100% committed to everything he does. So he's 100% committed to I'm the hero, and von Sydow's like, I'm 100% committed to I'm the bad guy. And you've got these two guys that are just, they're completely in it. And I think the supporting cast, for like one scene, like Peter Stormare as Dr. Eddie, he's so good. Like snotting, screaming in Swedish, the bit where he's like holding the eyes and he's like, "I'll put them in goodie bag." It's so, he leaves an impression.
His girlfriend's like wiping her ass as well, like on the toilet when you meet them. Like, it's disgusting, and it's Peter Stormare's a really interesting actor because you never really see him crop up and stuff, but when he does, he's always like really good at them. Whether it's like, I remember like when he watched like Arrow, I'm pretty sure I had a guest spot on Arrow and Flash once, and he's one of those like character actors that's so good at being a character actor, no one knows who he is. But in this, like as you said, Tom, he's disgusting. Like you don't like spending time with him, and you can't trust him. But ultimately, considering you've got the whole weird, oh, you put me away, ha ha, and he still helps him. It's that ultimate, like, I wouldn't say it's a stereotype of that sort of European doctor type thing, but just to get that like underworld in this pristine futuristic city that they're so focused on crimes of the future that they're not even sort of ready for their own, the other crimes other than murder. And it's a real interesting sort of segue with him. And I hate and love him at the same time. I don't want to spend time with him, but it builds character. And I think this film needs that you need to see how desperate Tom Cruise is going to get. And kind of said earlier, Paul, Tom Cruise looks awful in it. When the eyes change, I don't know if he's wearing like contact lenses, but his eyes are distorted after. Like, there's a really awkward like vibe to them, and it probably is contacts. But I love that they tease that earlier in the film Like, oh, this guy's a John Doe because he swapped his eyes out, so we'll never know who he is. They set everything up that's going to happen down the line, and it's really intriguing.
And I also, when it comes to like, you know, one scene actors, there's a whole thing made about Dr. Heinemann, the woman who created the precogs, that when she comes and she's just kind of a doddering old. I mean, I love Lois Smith. I think she's a fantastic actress. She'll always be the grandma from True Blood to me because I love True Blood. But she's just this doddering old woman watering plants. And yet she drugs Tom Cruise. She cures Tom Cruise and randomly kisses him. And she's only in the film for like 3 minutes. And yet the whole film, you're like, that was a weird lady. That was a weird... And I read that it was meant to be Meryl Streep.
Yeah. And she declined it.
And I'm like, I can't see anyone else being that weird. Just that bizarre.
I thought of Miriam Margolyes as Professor Sprout. came out in the same year though, which really, you know, there's a bit of witchcraft going on there, but it's really interesting because that kiss was unscripted. Apparently, like Tom Cruise was like genuinely confused, and they kept it on camera. Which I love little things like that.
To be fair, if I was an old lady in a film with Tom Cruise in his, you know, 30s, 40s, I'd probably do that too. You know, take your shot. Why the hell not? And it's on film. It lasts forever now. It's proof. I don't blame her. But yeah, it's so with the weird sci-fi plants that are alive and attacking him, and it's so weird. That thing about like even like Tim Blake Nelson as the organ playing guard who watches over the thing, and he's in a wheelchair. You don't know why. He's just in a wheelchair, and he's like, "Do you like my bow tie?" And he's making like steak and eggs. It's so, again, it's like a tiny little character thing.
Who for one second sounds like Tom Hanks.
Yeah,
I don't know if anyone picked that up.
He did a really good the GQ iconic roles. He did one of those, and he was talking about Minority Report, and he was talking about how his agent was like, "It's a Steven Spielberg film. Tom Cruise is going to be in it. It's going to be, you know, whatever it is, $150 million budget, blah blah blah." And he went, "Great, I need a script." And they went, "That's the thing. They're not giving anyone the script." And he went, "I'm not doing it then. I read scripts and I do it based on that." And his agent went back to Spielberg's people and said he won't do it. And Spielberg called Tim Blake Nelson personally and was like, "Why won't you do my film?" And he went, "It's not that I don't want to do your film. I'd love to work with you, but I don't do it without a script." And Spielberg went, "Of course you can see a script. That's a very reasonable thing to ask." And he read the script and he was like, "Oh yeah, do it." He's like, "Of course I'll do it." He was like, "It's a great script. I need to read it." And Spielberg was like, "Yeah, did they say you couldn't read the script? That's weird." And then he shows up and he's really memorable in it because he's, again, like Stormare, like Lois Smith. He's just weird. It's just a weird world that Spielberg created.
Yeah, I think that ties into what you were saying earlier about film noir. So most film noir characters, supporting characters, are not zany, but they're weird, and they've got a sort of, you know, a depravity about them that really comes across. I just want to sort of touch on, and which is Samantha Morton.
Yeah,
she is the best actress or actor in this film by a country mile. It should have been a star-turning performance. I know she's been nominated for a couple of Oscars, one before this came out and one after. But after this, you'd think she'd appear in a lot more like memorable things. Although, you know, I'm sitting here saying that I haven't seen, you know, the recent things she's been in. I know she's in The Walking Dead, for example.
Yeah, it's weird
for way too fucking long. That's another.
Her being in it almost made me go back to watch it because I was like, Samantha Morton in Walking Dead. That is weird. That's interesting. But I'm not going back to that show. I'm not going back.
She's fantastic in it, and she is easily the best thing about the film in terms of performances. I think it's the fact that she got overlooked in terms of Academy Awards for this is unbelievable. She won a Saturn Award for it. But yeah, it's a brilliant performance. I absolutely love it, and she's easily the best performer.
That scene in the bedroom where she's like sensing the history of Cruise and his ex-wife and the kid is such a well acted scene. She's so good in it because she looks happy and in pain. She can sense the happiness and that he was a good dad and she was a good mum and the kid was happy, but she can also feel their agony. And yeah, you're right. Her and Von Sydow definitely should have been in supporting categories. She's so good in it. She's so good.
It's really interesting as well because when you've got the three cogs, I like the idea that, you know, what the doctor points is that the correct one's essentially the female one. But it makes you, I don't think the film can justify if you had three on the run, it'd be too much, but you can pick one and each time you need the best performance from this because it's such a unique role in a very unique film that it's almost like this, not even fish out of water. It's, you know, when they take it to that weird club when like you can fulfill your fantasies, it's little things like that. Just it builds so much more, and it's kind of really exciting for like her character. She said, I love the scene of walk after that when they're like going through the supermarket, or not supermarket, it's like a mall, isn't it? They call it in America, like when they've got the balloons and she's telling like that's going to drop, and then she goes, oh, she knows or he knows to the lady who just stands still after. It's a very, very powering role. I think again, it's one of those that nothing to do with Tom Cruise, but when you've got the ultimate A-lister at the lead, the supporting cast is almost dropped off in terms of who's remembered and why. And I think because she's not going to have the career that I'd also say, you know, another young actor in this film, Colin Farrell, we're going to talk about. You know, he's gone on to be. I mean, I've been thinking about this. Colin Farrell. I don't think he's an underrated actor. I think he's an underappreciated actor because he is fantastic in most things. And I don't know why there's.
He kind of did. I think what happened to him is what happens to a lot of actors, in that he did interesting work to begin with. Minority Report, Tigerland is a great film as well. Phone Booth is amazing, and then he started doing the leading roles, SWAT, Alexander, all those sort of stuff. And I think the system chewed him up, and I know he had a lot of substance abuse issues. And then I think he kind of was like, I don't want to be a leading man. And since In Bruges, I think he literally just went, I want to be Brendan Gleeson. I want to be a character actor. And if you look at everything he's done since In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, Killing of a Sacred Deer, The Lobster, even Batman, which is a franchise. And instead of being Batman, he's lathered himself in makeup. You know, he's really kind of, you know, he's done the opposite of a reconnaissance. He's kind of gone, I don't want to be the leading man. I want to be the supporting man. And he reinvented himself in a very interesting way. And I think when people rediscovered him through In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths and all that, I think people then went back to like Minority Report and kind of went, there's that guy, the kind of slimy guy that you don't like, that's actually not that slimy. And with him, the film does a great thing of, he's the villain. Look at him. He's in a sharp suit. He's got a beard. He's on Tom Cruise's case and he's chewing gum. He's a bad guy. And it's like, no, he's just doing his job, actually. He's actually, if anything, he's more heroic than Tom Cruise is because he's doing what he's meant to be doing. And yeah, he's another one that you're like, yeah, he's really had an interesting career that I think once he got like, I don't know if he's sober, I'm assuming he's sober, he became just a very interesting character actor.
He's I know he's going to be in the new film this year. Oh god, I forgot to say The Banshees of Inertion, which is again In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths reunion, which I'm very much looking forward to. But even like 39, at the time of recording, this just come out this week. He's playing someone from Bristol, and he's got an incredible Bristolian accent that Americans won't understand. The same with Vigo doing a Coventry accent, which really surprised me.
I watched that last night. He's so good in it. He's really good in it. I didn't realize it was him at first.
Yeah,
I genuinely
forget
it was someone else.
And I think he's a very, as I said, underappreciated actor. And I think I've not seen After Him that came out earlier this year in the States, but if anyone's seen his Hot Ones interview, he talks exceptionally in that, and it's really worth it. It's his sort of philosophies and his opinions on life, and I really recommend anyone to have a look at that because Hot Ones is genuinely a great series. But the Colin Farrell one's just remarkable. Him just hearing him talk about life and what he's been through and his approach to the industry, it's really fascinating. And I think in this, as you said, Paul, he's the sort of should be villain, actually heroic, and when he dies, you're like, oh no, like, and it's that great moment from Von Zilla. I was like, well, if you had the three cogs, you'd have known this was coming, type thing. Like proper ball line before you kill someone. But I love him. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, he's fantastic in it, and you know, going back, he's definitely an actor that has aged quite well in terms of his filmography, that you can look back at stuff that he's worked on and gone, well, actually that was very good, and he was actually very good in it. I know that when I was younger, I don't think my dad particularly liked Colin Farrell as an actor, because he was just like, oh, it's just Colin Farrell doing so. But he's very good, and as you say, I mean, the things where he's the leads in, they just don't really work. He's very much at his best when he is in support of someone else. He is a supporting actor in a project. You know, he also plays villains really well. I love his performance in Fright Night.
Yes,
I think
yes.
The remake of Fright Night.
Horrible Bosses as well.
Yeah,
he's great in Horrible Bosses.
Yes.
Again, kind of a Tom Cruise thing. You know, if you think of Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder with the fat suit, and Colin Farrell kind of is doing a Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder thing in that. He's great in that. He is, I think, away from leading roles. Even I don't like Fantastic Beasts, but him in that first one as the sinister villain, he's really good. He brings a lot of gravity to it. I think they should have kept him. He should have been Grindelwald, in my opinion. I think those films would have gotten better with him.
My theory, this is a bit silly, I think he would have been all down for playing Grindelwald. And I think the moment they said 5 picture series, he was like, no way.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, the Big Shock's Batman, like, okay, cool, he's going to be Batman. It's like, wait, Colin Farrell's not just playing the Penguin, he's getting his own Penguin series. I don't see him as a franchise. Like, I don't see him like up himself like I'm above franchises. But he's the type of actor that picks his projects very wisely. And I think, you know, the Penguin series, I'm all down for. Whether it gets cancelled is, I guess, question part 2. We'll find out in the next few months of Warner Brothers. But he's a very intriguing, exciting actor. And in this film, certainly, you forget, you know, he was, I mean, obviously not just younger for the sake of it, but he was still, like, breaking into America at the time. Like, I think I know you mentioned Tigerland, Paul, but he hadn't done many films by the time he got to 2002. It was really sort of Phone Booth and this that, to me, Daredevil I've not seen, but he's meant to be great in, actually, for what it's worth. It's really that's where
he's all right in it. He gets overshadowed by Michael Clark Duncan as Kingpin, who decimates that film. He is the redeeming feature of that movie, as he was in most films. God rest his soul. He was a great talent. But Phone Booth as well is very underrated. Him, underrated Joel Schumacher film, and underrated Kiefer Sutherland as the phone booth guy, as the guy on the phone. That is a great film. Everyone should go back and rewatch that. That is great.
The first ever 15 rated film I saw, I was 6 years old. That's why, and I've never seen it since. I just remember it. I just remember I was like Colin Farrell in the phone for me for like the entire time. But yeah, I mean,
I'm looking back at filmography and post Minority Report Phone Booth. I mean, there are some, and up to In Bruges in 2009. There's some real duds in here. You know,
Alexander
SWAT,
bad.
Alexander, The New World, fucking shit, really bad. Miami Vice. And then you get post In Bruges, you get like really sort of interesting films.
He got in with some good directors as well. Like Lanthimos was a good move. Yeah.
Dr. Parnassus, which I actually really enjoy.
See,
Most-
he
no,
played
no.
one of the versions of Heath, didn't he? As
Yeah, it was him, Johnny
was it
Depp,
him?
and Jude Law.
Jude Law, yeah. And all
There's
of
only-
those
there's
are
only-
attached to Grindelwald.
Yeah, there's only one real film that you could probably say is a dud post
Totally cool.
in Bruges, which is Total Recall. Yeah,
That is bad.
but
Yeah,
other than that,
like-
I mean, and Fantastic Beasts, but then again, that's
He was all right. The
He's-
first one, I'd say the first one, he's fine.
I think he carries that film because he plays that role like Dracula. He's really hamming it up, and everything he says, he whispers, and he comes out of that scot-free. And I think he was wise, maybe not to return, judging by the next ones. But yeah, he's another one. Spielberg, he just picks those supporting casts, like the supporting cast of any one of his films, and you could do this with all of them. I'm looking forward to War of the Worlds because War of the Worlds has got a great supporting cast, in my opinion. When you get like Tim Robbins, yes, but this one's got such a great one because it's got it's a who's who of that guy. I love that guy. Oh, that one. I like that one too. He's in that movie. And yeah, Colin Farrell, like little baby-faced Farrell, is so good, even in the action stuff. Because do a fight scene against Tom Cruise, that takes you could be Billy Big Bollocks to go up against it. Like even Henry Cavill looked nervous in Mission Impossible. Henry Cavill's built like a tank. Colin Farrell is not.
No, that's a great scene, the car scene with him. I said, yeah, he's an interesting one, and a lot of his films, I think, yeah, he's one that down the line there's a lot more. Hopefully next year we're talking about for the Oscars. If the film is as good as I think we all hope it is, who knows? But if we want to move on, because they've almost gone 2 hours, which is an expert, which is also incredible. It's been a really good chat, though. 100%. It's been an incredible chat so far, and kind of talking about our main man, as we always do. Not the main man, the second main man in this series, Mr. John Williams. I never remembered the soundtrack to this film until I watched it last night. And I sort of started saying, why haven't I listened to this soundtrack more? Because I thought this was a very, very good soundtrack. And it's very... I don't want to say underrated, because all of his work's fantastic, and I say that every week, so I'm bored of saying it, but this is one where I was just like, why don't other people speak of the John Williams soundtrack in this film? And I'm going to bring up the one thing. I don't know if you're aware. The car chase, they use a bit of the same cues that's then used in Attack of the Clones, and famously then Attack of the Clones music is reused in the Chamber of Secrets scores, all in the same year for Mr. Williams. Listen, he'd have still been in his 70s doing these. It's the best ever. So the fact he could even do Star Wars, Harry Potter, and this in the same year is quite remarkable as far as composing goes. But the score felt like the film, like an inverted noir, that rather than going for those like bleaker scores that noir films do, it felt very science fictiony. But again, John Williams doing science fiction, it wasn't what you'd expect. I don't know quite how to describe what I thought of the score, but I think it's different to what we've had from him. Yet you can still tell it's Williams, and it scores well next to Spielberg, but also from AI Last Week, which was also a John Williams sci-fi score. I'm glad it just didn't sound like that for 2 hours. And these ones jump in because I'm a bit fuzzled out. I'm always terrible at talking about, because I just say every week that he's fantastic, and he is.
Well, he is. That's the problem you have. And again, it's like we're doing the Spielberg series. You're going, Spielberg's great. It's like, yeah, he is. He is great. And the Williams score's good. Of course it is. It's John Williams. Like John Williams, again, a bit like Cruise and Von Sydow. He never really phones it in. Even if he's reusing cues, it's all in service of something. And I think his score for this, like rewatching it, I was like, I can hear the Star Warsiness of the action, but I still think it works. I still think it plays up kind of the absurdity of the situations. I think that, and when it needs to underline the horror, it underlines the horror. Like some of the music when it's got the spider cameras, I think he really plays up almost like a Jaws type thing. He plays up the threat when Tom Cruise is in the ice bath and the bubble pops and stuff like that. I think the score is really underrated, which is going to happen when you've got like 100 scores.
Yeah, I'm sort of going to take the opposite view, sort of. where I don't think you're. But this is compared to other works of his that have been really mainstay soundtracks. But I don't necessarily think it's his best one. I definitely wouldn't put it in the top 10. You can top 10 of my John Williams scores. You
None
can
of them are going to be Star Wars.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the leitmotifs coming through in most of the score, and there are some really catchy is the wrong word, but memorable pieces in there. I mean, the Anne Lively motif is really disturbing and adds to the imagery that's on screen. But I don't necessarily think that out of a few tracks, I don't necessarily think it's his most outstanding piece. I mean, you compare it to other sort of more low key stuff that he's scored, like AI, which is underrated and underappreciated as a score. I think this isn't necessarily his best, but it's still but you're still getting peak John Williams. He's not. He doesn't produce a bad one. Just some of his stuff isn't as good as other pieces that he's made with a back catalogue of shitloads of films.
No, that's fair, and that's the thing as well. Like, there's so many to go from. It makes it when it's like this, just this is gonna be great. Talking about John Williams every week, and talking about John Williams every week's got really hard because it's like, yeah.
Okay, what can you say? Oh yeah, the score was good. Move on.
Yeah, literally, and that's what's going to happen probably, because it is one of those where it's so hard to talk about. It's a lot harder than I thought. Whereas it's just probably the greatest collaboration ever between a director and a composer. I don't think it'll ever be topped, no matter how hard Zimmer and Nolan try. But if we want to move on to some of the actual not behind the scenes, sorry, some of the post release stuff. So box office, 380 million gross off 100 mil budget, 10th highest grossing film of 2002. Pretty good considering you've got stuff like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Spider-Man, Star Wars, to name a few, all starting to break through in that early noughties blockbuster trend. Sitting in at 10th for an original sci-fi concept, not bad. Very surprised and gutted that this is one Oscar nomination for Best Sound. Listen, Oscar nominations aren't the be-all and end-all, they never are, but for the Spielberg series, they're almost like every week. It's more of a rarity to have one or none than it is to not have like 5 or 6. But what's really interesting is talking about this film's evolution over the time. Obviously, I was young when it came out. I didn't see it till the 10s. A lot of critics, I think Roger Ebert called it one of his favorite, either science fiction or just favorite films of the noughties. This appeared on a lot of lists towards the end of the decade. A lot of science fiction folk saying it's one of the best sci-fi films of the century so far. I hate terms like that because we're literally 22 years into it now. So calling it so far, it's not like it's like 1996 or something. Do you know what I mean? But how do we feel about this film? I mean, we've spoken a lot about this film today, but my opinions haven't changed over time. It's just that more my knowledge of the real world has evolved, which enhances this film for me. I hope that doesn't sound weird. But it's a tough one to talk about because contextually, I'd have loved to have been at this age when this film came out, to see it as the years have gone by, people's opinions on it. Because I'm just trying to think of some of the best sci-fi films of this sort of century so far. It's tough because there's probably so many wonderful ones I've not seen. But as a concept and as again, having a Spielberg, having a Cruise leading it, certainly this, if I was to try and literally list everyone I've seen this century, this would probably be sitting near the top. And I think there's a lot going on this. But also this is more classic sci-fi than modern sci-fi. Like, it's sci-fi, technically. Oh god, what's the Oscar Isaac film with the robots?
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, like, on paper that's sci-fi, but its premise isn't as science fictiony as something like Minority Report. So to like broaden the genre, it's really hard to do so. If that makes any sense. But how are we feeling about just this film? Talking about it in 20 years. It's been 20 years this year since it's come out.
Yeah, it's one where funnily enough, I was at a party last week and people were mentioning they watched the Jurassic Park episode I was on. They were saying they watched that. And I said, I'm going on it again. I'm talking about Minority Report. And it's amazing how many people suddenly go, I love Minority Report. Oh, Minority Report's one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies. Oh, I love that film. oh yeah, that film's great. And, like, it's one of those ones where it did well. Like 10th highest grossing film of the year is good, but like, it's one of those ones where I do think it's grown in stature from, oh, that was a good film, to people really love it. People really, and I think there's a memeability of the hand wavy stuff at the beginning, where he's doing that and then that and stuff. And, you know, when Empire did their, like,
Man,
yeah, when Empire did a, they were doing something, one of their, it was like 30 years of Empire or something. They got actors to recreate iconic film moments. And so you had like Sam Neill with a flare, and you had Christian Bale with loads of business cards and an axe. And it's quite telling that the Tom Cruise one is him against the pre-crime board. And you think Tom Cruise has had a lot of iconic moments in films. For that to be the one that Empire recreate with him is quite telling that people have really taken that one to heart. And I think it's just interesting how it's one of those ones where people don't bring it up, but when it gets brought up, everyone seems to just love it and be like, oh yeah, I saw that on TV once. That's a great film. And I think, yeah, it's a testament to how sometimes context and how prescient it is has, I think, worked in its favor. That stuff we were talking about, the thinking about the future properly, I think has really, it stands up more than a lot of, like, I like AI, but AI is a bit far-fetched.
My opinion on the film is that nowadays that I am going to be less flip-floppy on it, because back in my youth, sound older than I am there. But yeah, when I was younger, I hate to use the term, but these guys really annoy me now. I was very much a snobby film student.
Everyone would be like that, though. Everyone's gone through it, right? When you think you're above blockbusters, or then you start liking blockbusters and people being snobby to you. To me, sorry, Tom's jumping. I'm just gonna chill in the best of both worlds.
So
I am above and below them.
Exactly it. But when I was younger, I would sort of look at films in more a sort of cinema sins, sort of pick apart plot holes that aren't plot holes if you actually watch the fucking films that you're taking a look at. I was very much in that mindset, and this was very much the case where I watched it. I would one day love it, and then the next day go, well, why doesn't he just hide away in a basement? Well, then the film would be five minutes.
Why did the eyes work? Why do the eyes work when he's banned? I'm glad you mentioned cinema sins, because again, there's no shame in it. They were massive, and like a lot of people did used to watch them. They were at the forefront of, I guess, the internet era, and I just think a lot of people that watched that stuff matured and were able to see through it. And I think, Tom, this will be on the football side of it, which you're familiar with as Arsenal fans TV. Eventually, the viewers see through it, think, hold on, they don't actually believe this. This is just them saying it to get the views, to get the attention. And I think it's a very interesting conversation that everyone should have, because there's nothing wrong with being a snobby film person or being someone that enjoys blockbusters. But sorry to jump in.
That's I completely agree. But I suppose what I'm sort of trying to get at is my sensibilities have matured from back when I sort of mid to late 2000s / at university in sort of the very early 2010s, that I feel I've definitely matured as a viewer and can appreciate films like Minority Report more, where I probably would have been a bit sniffy, because of supposed holes that I'd be able to find in it, which don't matter at all. It's the story that is the main thing, how it's directed, the ideas it presents, not, oh, that wouldn't work in this way because that's not how physics works, or just something stupid like that. I mean, that's very much a tangent on my sensibilities now, and but there we go. I rewatching it today, I thought it was great.
I want to try that drug he does, that thing where he puts in his mouth and it goes. I want to try that.
It's like an inhaler. That's why I was like so confused at the start. But it is interesting. And if I'm kind of gonna, I know we've been going almost 2 hours, but really quickly, 4 final thoughts. Everyone, they have a favorite scene if they want to really quickly list it. I mean, I love pretty much this whole film, but if I'm going to pick my favorite scene, it's probably going to be the opening 20 minutes, because I think it doesn't just do such a fantastic job at setting up the film. It puts you as the audience perspective into believing that this system can work. So not only does the film if they just showed it as black and white and as simple as, you can get away with it, Tom Cruise for a moment, because we spend so long in the opening scene with the black and white murder, the build up to it. That's us as a viewer thinking, okay, this system works. And then the film is about taking you out of that perspective, putting you into the real life angle. So I hope that makes some formulaic sense somewhere to someone. But my favorite scene is the opening. And I think it's a very underrated opening, actually. You just both did earlier. It's like a Bond sequence almost.
Yeah, for me, everything after they give Max von Sydow that ceremonial revolver, and then he gets the phone call from Anderton, and he's doing the whole thing. They're all asking for the autographs, and he's like looking around, and the video's playing, and then he brings up the son, and Tom Cruise loses his shit. I can't remember what the son's name is now. And Tom Cruise is in the kitchen, and he turns around and he's like, "Don't you ever say his name!" And all of that, I think, is such a great. And them just stood on the balcony confronting each other. I think all of that is such. The panic on Max von Sydow's face is so palpable that I really like that whole sequence. I think that's really good.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites as well. I also really like the one of my favorite scenes is as you mentioned, Paul, the last 15 minutes of the film is fantastic. The moment that Anderton decides not to shoot Crow is very good, and that sequence is really powerful, and Samantha Morton's acting is fantastic in that. And the moments after where they're in the cottage and she's, telling us how Sean would have been if he had grown up. But then the reality hits. I think that's a wonderful sequence as well, and that's a wonderful scene. And everybody in that, Cruise, Morton, forget the other actor's name, the plays his wife. All of them are fantastic in that moment, and that's a really powerful and heartbreaking scene. And I love it.
No, really well said. And kind of moving on to there, heading to final thoughts as well. For me, this has been quite an experience, not just this video today. It's officially going to be the longest one on the series so far, which is fantastic. But it's kind of as if there's so much to say about this film to read into this film. And I just think it's so captivating. And actually, to be able to discuss it with people, I think it's really exciting. And we've not been able to delve into a film in the sense that we spent a while talking about the world, the future, their future. And it just creates this mindset where, whether it was as intentionally done, which we know it was, the ins and outs of this film, the thematics around it, I genuinely believe not just a thought-provoking film, but I don't want to say masterpiece because we said that with Spielberg stuff, and I hate using that word. But it's definitely, like, as I said earlier, top 10 Spielberg film for me. But that's discredit just say it's a top 10 Spielberg film. This to me is like a fundamentally must-watch science fiction film, like moving forward, so that I'd probably want to see this more. And I'd imagine every time you see it, you probably are able to read something new or understand something new. And I just think it's quite mesmerizing from the way it's shot to the script, to the story, to the characters, and also reflecting on what the setup. I think it's the perfect film for Spielberg and Tom Cruise to have collaborated on.
I think for 2002, it's one of my top 10 films of that year. One of my favorite Cruise films. Yeah, rewatching it again. Yeah, it was the character beats that really stuck out to me. Like you say, the house scene. All the weird grossness as well. It's just that really stuck with me. Just him chugging toxic water that had eyeballs in it and stuff. It's so weird. It's such a weird film. That's probably why I think a lot of people like it, because it's just so, it's not atypical for Spielberg, but it's such a dark-hearted film as well that I think, yeah, I really love it.
Yeah.
Obviously, been here 2 hours.
Yeah, I will 100% get behind that. And I mean, there's nothing more I can add to than just it's great. I like it.
No, exactly. And this is what I like these videos, especially with the science fiction, with the themes. And as you kind of said, us three will be back to do War of the Worlds in a couple of weeks. We're not far away from that. Kind of moving on to what is next. The next one in this series is Catch Me If You Can, coming Tuesday, the 23rd of August. A very different film from Minority Report. But of course, you get Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. So do come back for that one. And as we said earlier, we want to hear from people below. So comment your thoughts on Minority Report. Do you enjoy the film? Have you read into it as much as we have? Are there maybe some things we've missed that you haven't? Definitely comment this, because I'm curious to read up on what people want to say. And as well, please do help support the channel. Hit that like button, do comment, and subscribe. If you're a fan of Steven Spielberg, you're a fan of Tom Cruise, there's a lot more videos coming for those two on this, alongside a whole host of other things. We are moving into award season. I say award season, it's like festival season and award season, but the shift is coming. There aren't as many blockbusters out. We're starting to get more of the films out we're going to be speaking about for the Oscars next year. So a lot of new reviews on the way. Of course, Spielberg's The Fabelmans at the moment, for some reason, is generally in the UK, but we're hoping for London Film Festival. Let's give us some good news if the BFI really can. And social medias. If you want to find us, follow us, find out what videos are coming, it's the best way to do so. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. A link to Redbubble in that description below. And we've been mentioning War of the Worlds a lot. We've been mentioning Catch Me If You Can. The next few entries are up on the screen now. We've got Catch Me If You Can, followed by The Terminal, followed by War of the Worlds, and then Munich as well. All of them got mentioned today by The Terminal, which is very interesting. But there's a lot more Spielberg films. This series isn't going.
I like The Terminal. Terminal's good. Don't care what.
I've still never seen it. It'll be one of the big ones for me when the chance comes. The only Spielberg film not released on Blu-ray, by the way, my collection now unfortunately knows. But for both of you here, Paul, I've got your Twitter here at Paul Klein. Where can the people follow you alongside that, and why should they? In a really non-horrid way. That sounds awful. I just laugh.
They shouldn't. They really shouldn't. No. Paul Klein with 2 O's. I also have Letterboxd, which is Paul Klein with 1 O, because I've been consistent. And you'll find links to my reviews, and generally I tweet absolute nonsense. It's currently how the next Prey film should be, about a samurai fighting a predator. That's my whole personality now. That's what it is.
We all want to see it, though. We all want to see it.
Just let him fight a samurai, man. And then have him fight pirates.
Actually, I can't even think of that. That'd be incredible. Tom, though, I know you don't have pirates, but you've got beers. Tell people not just about your socials, but what's new, what's being built towards.
So I feel like I've given this spiel every week on the because of. Has it officially been the most?
You have now, I think, joint with Tate both on 7. Or he's on 6 and you're on 7. Sorry, we'll find out soon.
Get in. It's just a competition I've had with myself. Can I get on the most Spielberg videos?
The Tom Hanks of this channel.
I feel like I've given this every week, but you can find me on Twitter at Films and Beer. Essentially, I ran a blog during lockdown where I picked a film to watch and then tried to find a beer that was thematically relevant to it and then review both. So that has been on a bit of a hiatus since January, or at the end of last year, rather. But I have picked it back up, and it is now going to be in video form on YouTube with monthly retrospectives on one particular film. We'll look behind the scenes at things and just generally give thoughts and opinions, plus, reviewing modern newer releases. So that's going to be at the end of August.
Definitely. So everybody, please follow Tom and subscribe to him for when the channel launches. I've shared it on our feeds, but there'll be a link in the description below as well. Tom, it's very exciting because we get to plug something that's going to happen, which is. But also, I know what your first film is. There's a tease at the end of Tom's first video. So look at the intro video, and it teases what film's next. I guessed it wrong. He corrected me, but you can all guess as well. So, as I said, it's been a pleasure having you both on, talking Minority Report, talking Spielberg and the cruise. There's more. 2 weeks. 2 weeks for the Wells. I think 2 weeks. Yeah, no, 3 weeks. Sorry, 3 weeks. Ignore me. I've already got that wrong. 3 weeks. Us three will be back potentially with Tate. He is going to be back from his holiday at some point. We're pre-recording all these well in advance, so people might not know, but we never really know in truth with regards to dates. That's why we says to go get us on social media. It's the best way to do so. So once again, thank you all for watching. Thank you both for joining me, taking time out of your day, and we'll see you all on the next one. Take care.